Have you ever felt like you could do more, but something is holding you back? Most people think they're just tired, but it's not fatigue. It's a limit someone else has imposed on them. In this video, I'll show why 40% isn't the limit. It's the starting line. We'll talk about mental breaks, the power of your environment, and why you're not a light bulb, but a power plant. And at the very end, a practical tool that will help you tap into your true maximum. If you want to learn how to squeeze more out of your life, stay with me and subscribe right now. Let me tell you a paradox that once made me rethink everything I was living for. The most common reason people stop isn't fatigue. And it's not even laziness. The most common reason people don't go further is that they simply don't know they can. They don't realize that their limit isn't a wall, it's a mirror. Imagine a runner who stops at 4 miles because someone told him that going further would be too much. And yet, he could have gone just as far again. Maybe you've stopped the same way, not because you couldn't, but because someone taught you to doubt. I once heard, people usually give up at 40% of their potential. And at first I thought, no way, that's got to be an exaggeration. But then I remembered myself at 25. No money, no prospects, no clear plan, and most of all, with an inner voice that kept saying, you've already given your all. But that wasn't my voice. That was the voice of habit, the voice of circumstances, the voice of a tired past. And only when I met Earl Schoaf, a mentor who told me something simple. You're not a light bulb, you're a power plant. Don't wait for energy, generate it. Did I begin to rebuild myself. And you know what? I discovered I was capable of far more than I thought. But only after I stopped putting periods where life hadn't even started yet. We'll talk about why we accept 40% as normal, how our environment subtly conditions us to settle for mid-level comfort, and how habits can either be a rope that drags us down or a ladder that lifts us up. You'll learn how Rohn trained himself to squeeze more out of every day, how he built self-discipline when everything around him was saying, take a break. And in the end, I'll give you a practical way to test. Are you really at your limit, or have you simply not started yet? Because this isn't a video about getting inspired for an hour. This is a video for those who want to raise their internal standard, for those ready to ask themselves, how much can I really do? We often think we're tired, but in reality, we simply don't know how far we can go. Our brain, our body, our spirit, they all run on programs we absorb from the outside world. And one of the most insidious programs is the habit of stopping the moment things become just a little uncomfortable. Just a little. Not painful, not unbearable, just uncomfortable. That's exactly when the 40% moment arrives. The number is symbolic, but highly telling. You'd be surprised how many people stop, not because they can't go further, but because they think they've done enough. We're built in a way that the brain tries to conserve energy. It feeds you phrases like, that's enough, this is fine, why push it? What am I, a robot? Sound familiar? And so you're still breathing, but no longer truly living. You're completing plans, but not creating breakthroughs. You're living like a light bulb, shining only as much as the current allows. But as I've said before, you're not a light bulb. You are a power plant. That realization didn't come to me right away. At 25, I had debt, fear, disappointment, and blame. Everyone was at fault. The government, the company, the boss, the circumstances, my childhood, the weather, the stars. Then I went to a seminar hosted by my future mentor, Earl Schoaf. He looked at me and said, young man, you don't lack strength, you lack standards. And that phrase hit me like a jolt of electricity. Standards, not inspiration, not talent, not luck, but standards. What I accepted as normal for myself. And that's where true transformation begins. When you raise the bar, not in your achievements, but in your self-concept. That's when I decided, no more just fine, no more good enough. I started waking up earlier, not for someone else, but for myself. I began reading books that didn't entertain me, but shaped me. I learned to think with discipline, because as Schoaf said, everything you have now is a result of who you've become. And if you want more, become more. Many people ask, but isn't that hard? Of course it's hard, but it's even harder to live below your potential, to get used to less, to suffocate not from overload, but from underliving. Because when you stop at 40%, everything around you feels it. Relationships become shallow, work becomes flavorless, self-esteem becomes shaky. You start doubting your own capacity because each day you sign a silent contract with mediocrity. You know, I often compare it to running in the fog. You can't see the finish line, and it feels pointless to keep going. But that's the moment you have to trust not your sight, but your rhythm. Run not because you see the end, but because you are a runner, and every step is proof of who you are. Success doesn't begin with the outcome, it begins with a decision. Once at an event, I said, success is not something you chase, it's something you attract by becoming a better version of yourself. And it works both ways. If you let yourself slip, you attract chaos. If you grow, you attract opportunity. But only if you operate not on autopilot, but with conscious intent every single day. I remember when I started writing down my goals daily, not once a year, not just before New Year's, every day. It was my personal ritual, not because I doubted, but because I was growing. And you know what happened after a few months? I didn't just start achieving more, I started feeling different. My sense of self transformed. I became a different man, not by accident, by choice. Now listen to me carefully, this is just the first key. We haven't reached the depth yet, because the most powerful part is still ahead. We haven't yet talked about what's really holding you back. We haven't examined your environment. And most importantly, we haven't touched the practice that will show you how much fuel is really left in your tank. And you'll be surprised. But before we go there, I want you to do one small thing. Ask yourself, at what percentage am I living today? Not in achievements, in energy, in honesty, in the decision to be more than I was yesterday, and write it down, because very soon we're going to find out, is this really your maximum or just a temporary stop on the road to your true self? Imagine a person trying to escape a trap. They're paddling, struggling, breathing heavily, but every time they rise a little, something pulls them back, and they begin to think, maybe I'm just not capable of more. But the truth is different. What's holding them back is their environment. People who are used to your 40% will never let you hit 100 because it would call their own choices into question. I learned this the hard way. When I first started changing, not everyone cheered. Some said, "Why do you even need this?" Others, "You've changed, haven't you?" That was the first time I truly heard the sound of an invisible chain. Not physical, not harsh, but saucy, but soft and sticky. The chain of habit, mutual comfort, and shared mediocrity. But I made a decision. If I wanted to become different, I needed to be among different people. And here I'll mention Earl Schaff again. When I started learning from him, I wasn't just attending lectures, I immersed myself in a new universe. He told me something that flipped my worldview. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. 5. I sat down and wrote out my 5. And I had to pause. 2 constantly complained. 1 lived in the past, another was afraid of every step. Only 1 dared to dream. I realized there was a crowd battling inside me, but I got to choose who stayed close. Changing your environment doesn't always mean cutting off friends or family. It means shifting the energy, changing your frequency, starting to attract those who are already living on the level you aspire to reach. Sometimes that means staying silent where you once argued. Sometimes it means listening instead of pushing your opinion, but it always means choosing. Am I climbing up or staying put because it's comfortable? I started attending new circles. I listened to people who had achieved what I only dreamed of, and though I often felt small next to them, that was a sign of growth. You don't grow when you're always comfortable. You need some discomfort, a challenge, that feeling that says, I'm not there yet, but I'm no longer here. Why is this so important? Because your environment sets your normal. If everyone around you believes that working 9 to 5 is the ultimate dream, you'll subconsciously begin to believe it too. If everyone jokes about failure, you'll fear taking risks. If everyone lives at 40%, then 41% feels heroic. But only when you see someone living at 80%, 90%, 100%, a spark goes off inside you. Why not me? That happened to me when I met people living with purpose. They didn't just earn money, they created impact. They didn't just work, they built. I remember one of them telling me, "Jim, money is a side effect of growth. True wealth is who you become in the process." And I understood, your environment isn't just background noise, it's your spiritual temperature. And if you want to boil, you need to be somewhere that heat is possible. But how do you know your environment is holding you back? Here are a few signs. First, you rarely feel inspired. Second, every new idea is met with doubt, not support. Third, there's more criticism than curiosity. And most importantly, you leave conversations feeling drained, not uplifted. I'm not saying run away from everyone, I'm saying form a second circle. A wheel that turns you forward, people who talk about the future, not others, who plan instead of complain, who search for solutions instead of problems. And that kind of environment will appear when you become the kind of person who demands more. I remember when I started spending time with entrepreneurs. I had nothing yet, but I could already feel my thinking change. My questions changed. Not should I try, but how exactly can I do it? Not will it work, but what's the price? And that shifted my entire mindset. I wasn't just an optimist anymore. I became a doer. I no longer needed anyone to push me because something else had taken over inside. Not 40%, not 60%, but a full conscious maximum. Now let me ask you, who are your five? What thoughts surround you every day? What language fills your space? Because if you want to change yourself, change the air you breathe. You can't soar while inhaling the dust of habit. You need fresh air, the air of growth. And this isn't some dramatic metaphor. This is practical truth. Because only when you're in a space where 100% is the baseline, where daily progress is the norm, will you start to feel that it's actually possible. And then your entire system will begin to rewire. You'll start shedding the unnecessary, feeling more, seeing further, and most importantly, acting bolder. But even that's not the end. We haven't yet talked about the core, how to unlock the energy that's already inside you, but dormant. How to stop waiting for inspiration and start generating it. How to finally become not a consumer of energy, but its source. Because the real breakthrough doesn't start out there. It starts the moment you say, I am the power plant, and I create my world. And that's what we're going to dive into next. If you're still here, that means you're already nearing your 60%. But I'm not letting you go just yet, because we're about to raise the bar. Are you ready?
So we've already come a long way together. We've shaken off the old limitations, the ones that stop us at 40%. We've looked straight at the kind of environment that often feeds us comfort instead of growth. But one final and most important zone remains. The zone where true power is born. Power not just for yourself, but for others too. It's not inspiration, not willpower, not random motivation. It's your internal power plant. Do you know why this metaphor inspires me so deeply? Because it's more profound than it seems. A light bulb shines only when someone switches it on. It's passive, dependent, limited. But a power plant, that's a source. It generates, it produces, it gives. But, and this is key, only when it's tuned and aligned, when all its parts work in harmony. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. When I began changing my life, I ran into a new question. Where do I get the strength every day? Because motivation came sometimes, but sometimes it didn't. And I realized I didn't need emotional spikes. I needed a system that works regardless of circumstances, like a generator. That's when I began building my inner power plant. And the first thing I fed into it was a philosophy. You've probably heard me say, don't wish it were easier, wish you were stronger. That's not just a nice quote, that's the core. When you believe the world must change, you wait. When you believe you must change, you act. And that's when the system kicks in. You no longer wait for favorable conditions. You create them. You don't rely on external energy because it's already flowing from within. I remember one day I had to speak in front of a huge audience. I was exhausted. A week of flights, meetings, almost no rest. And there I was, backstage, listening to my inner voice whisper, maybe give a little less this time. People won't notice anyway. But then I remembered, I am a power plant. My job isn't to conserve energy, it's to create it.
So I stepped on stage with a smile, with fire, with passion, not because I had the energy, but because I remembered who I was. And you know what happened? The fatigue vanished. The audience came alive, and I felt it again. The source is in me. So the question is, how do you build it? How do you construct that station inside yourself? First, a daily routine. I always say, discipline is the bridge between desire and achievement. What you do every day builds you. Even the small things, especially the small things, waking up a little earlier, reading instead of scrolling, starting the morning with a plan, not with chaos. This isn't just productivity, it's a way to remind yourself, I am a creator, not a victim. Second, long-term thinking. A power plant isn't built for one moment. It's designed for years, and so are you. Your strength isn't in one big leap. It's in the thousands of small steps you take, even when no one sees, even when no one claps, even when the result is still on the horizon. Because true inner strength is movement without applause. Third, service to others. Yes, it may sound counterintuitive, but the more you give, the more energy you unlock. When I began sharing my experiences, mentoring, helping, I realized something. I was growing too. A person's energy rises when they become useful, and then your power plant starts lighting not just your path, but others too. But there's one more piece the system can't run without: responsibility. Yes, it's heavy, it's not as glamorous as dreams, but only it flips the switch. Everything begins when you say, "This is my life, and I create it." Not the government, not your parents, not the weather, not the economy, me. And this isn't a burden, it's a privilege, the privilege to build. Remember I told you I had nothing at 25? But that's when everything started, because I made the decision to be a power plant, not to wait for light, but to become the one who creates it. And that changed everything. So now, having gone through these 3 deep layers, inner limits, the power of your environment, and your internal energy, it's time to act, not just listen, not just nod, but get on your track and ask, how fully am I really living? And what else could unlock my real power? Because the practical part is just ahead. And there's something special there, a test. Not on what you know, but how deep you go. 5 questions, 5 mirrors, and you'll see, not just your strength, but the potential that's been waiting all along for you to turn on the current. For now, take a deep breath, look around, and ask yourself, is my internal generator switched on? Now it's time for action. You've listened to a lot. You may already feel something starting to move inside, but true transformation is solidified through action, through honesty with yourself. So I want to invite you on a short inward journey. No fluff, no long pauses, just 5 questions, 5 quick mirrors, and each one rated from 1 to 10. How does it work? Simple. 1 means not at all. 10 means absolutely fully. Don't pause. Don't write anything yet. Just listen and answer as you go. Ready? First question. To what extent am I living right now as a power plant, not a light bulb? Are you generating energy or just consuming it? Do you light others up or wait to be lit by someone else? 1, you burn out without inspiration. 10, you shine no matter the circumstances. Second question, how much does my environment fuel my growth instead of stifling it? Do I hear support, challenge, new ideas, or just the usual phrases like don't stand out, be careful? Why do you need this? 1, your environment drags you down. 10, it lifts you up. Third question, how often do I feel drained, not physically but internally? Do I lose energy on things that aren't mine? Do I give myself away where I shouldn't? 1, I live in constant drain. 10, my inner current flows where it creates change. Fourth, how regularly do I challenge myself? When was the last time I did something scary but elevating? Are my boundaries stretching or shrinking? 1, I haven't stepped out in ages. 10, every month is a new level. And fifth, final question, how honestly can I say I'm living at the maximum of my potential right now? Not in dreams, in daily actions, in presence, in how I treat myself. 1, I'm surviving. 10, I'm already living the life I once dreamed of. No need to write anything down right now, just reflect. And if you feel like it, come back to these questions after the video, walk with them, journal them, but most importantly, allow yourself not to dodge the answers. Because this isn't just an evaluation, it's a direction. It's your personal growth map. And if even 1 question struck a chord that's your signal, your station is ready to generate more. If this video gave you a spark, hit like. It's like a pat on the back, short, but warm. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. We've got a lot more ahead on strength, character, and breakthrough. And maybe, just maybe, the next video will shift your direction even more deeply. You know, sometimes when evening falls and the world quiets down, I remember myself at 25. My wallet was empty, but my head was full of doubts. And I think if I had given up then, if I had believed that 40% was my limit, everything would be different. And this conversation with you wouldn't be happening, but I didn't give up. One day I just decided I haven't shown all I'm capable of yet. And that is a decision you can make too. Not tomorrow, not after a course, not when you have more time, but right now. Because life isn't a generator of random events. It's your power plant, your system of thinking, decisions, habits, and will. And if something isn't working yet, that's not the end. It's a technical pause. Recalibrate. Check your inner wiring. Remember why you started, and restart it all. You're not just a person who wants more. You are a source, a generator, a creator, a conduit of energy this world needs. Your light isn't the result of external events. It's your internal temperature, and only you decide whether it stays warm or ignites into a blaze. Remember this phrase, maybe it will become for you what it became for me. If you want to have more, become more. If you want to change your life, start by changing who you are. And now that you've listened to this video, said only 1 action remains, not hitting like, although that's always appreciated, but hitting that inner switch and saying, from today on, I don't wait for energy. I create it, because you're not a light bulb. You are a power plant, and the world has yet to see what you're capable of when you operate at full capacity. See you in the next video, and remember, your maximum is still ahead.